everyone ready? Time begins now. I strongly affirm today's resolution. Resolve the United States federal government should ban the construction of new coal-fired power plants and should phase out all existing coal-fired power plants by 2025. First, I'll just briefly go over some framework and definitions, then I'll move straight into the affirmative case. Now, most of the definitions are pretty contextual. Just obviously, ban means to say you can't build any new ones, and phase out will be gradually leading up to 2025, when there will be none of them remaining. Now, our plan text is just for the United States federal government, as soon as possible, no funding necessary, basically to just implement the resolution. So say no new coal-fired power plants, or ones that use coal, burn coal to get electricity, can be built, and over the course of now to 2025, so the next 10 years, start phasing out all the ones that we currently have right now. Judges, we ask you to weigh this on a scale of net benefits, or whichever side can provide more benefits overall to a greater number of people. Now, to move straight into the affirmative case. Our first point is that taking this action helps to combat climate change. Now, coal, what is being used in these power plants, is the dirtiest and the largest emitter of CO2 that there is in creating electricity, which means it contributes the most to creating more climate change. In fact, 83% of all the CO2 produced by the United States since 1990 to 2009 came solely from coal-fired power plants. So 83% came just from these power plants. Thus, we see we're getting a lot of carbon dioxide just from using this form of electricity. In addition, using coal has the highest ratio of CO2 output per the amount of electricity that you get back from it, according to the U.S. Department of Energy. Thus, we clearly see that we're creating far more CO2 for the amount of electricity we're creating than using any other form of electricity, whether that be renewables or fossil fuels. Yes?
So, about 50% of the U.S.'s power consumption comes from coal-fired power plants. What are we going to do to make up that 50%?
Well, in the status quo right now, renewables are rapidly gaining traction, so that will be one way that we're going to be getting this. In addition, right now, we're not saying natural gas cannot exist. So we're going to be seeing all of the forms of electricity that are right here growing, and as it is gradually phasing it out over a course of 10 years, these will begin expanding as coal begins decreasing in relevance. Now, to continue on with this, we see that right now the United States is in the top 3 emitters of carbon dioxide because of coal, as well as overall second in the world. So we see that right now, according to the Department of Energy, if the United States specifically, and the world as a whole, does not clean up this act with coal soon, the amount of climate change that we experience will be irreversible. We're very near a tipping point where we've created too much climate change, too much global warming, that we will not be able to turn it back. And they predict that if we do not turn around soon, then we will not be able to in the future. So we see that right now, we're hurting climate change as a whole, and that by helping to ban this construction of coal-fired power plants will help to prevent all these harms. Because global warming and climate change lead to less agricultural productivity as a whole, which means there's more food shortages. We see more of the polar ice caps melting, taking away habitats from animals, as well as leading to rising sea levels, which threaten a lot of coastline cities. We see more ocean acidification, which hurts all the organisms in the ocean, many of which are at the bottom of the food chain. We see more acid rain, which hurts the people of the world as a whole. We see that all of these disproportionately affect less developed countries. So overall, we see that with climate change, we'll be hurting the globe, hurting the United States as a whole. But by taking out one of its biggest polluters, we'll help to turn around these impacts and change our future. Now, our second point is that banning this construction and phasing out all of this will uphold our agreements with countries such as China and India. Now, as of November 2014, the United States made an agreement with China to help to reduce its impact on climate change, reduce its emissions of CO2. They made a similar but less binding agreement with India in January of 2015. Now, China and India are the first and third, respectively, emitters of CO2. So we see that right now, the United States, while it can have a large impact, would have even more of an impact if it got both of these two countries on board. Now we can see we've already made these agreements, but according to Vox in November of 2014, these agreements will only hold out, only be successful if the United States affirms them early so that China and India follow through. Because China and India aren't just going to do it if the United States doesn't. The United States needs to set this precedent, show that it is politically acceptable and a good thing to be helping to help the environment and to reduce these CO2 emissions. So we see that relations with China and India will improve because they will not see the United States as going back on their word. That'll help the United States in the future when it tries to make similar agreements or agreements in areas such as economics or politics, whatever it is. So we see the United States setting a precedent for following through to fight climate change, but also a precedent to support incentivizing renewable energies. Because in the 1980s, the United States put more money into wind energy. Since then, the cost of it has dropped 90%. So we see that clearly governments investing and incentivizing this renewable energy is effective. But we need the United States to set this precedent for itself and worldwide for it to actually have an impact in reducing the effects of climate change. Now our third point is merely that of death, or in other words, that coal-fired power plants are very bad for the health of humans. Now, among other things, they create a lot of air pollution, all the CO2, particulate matter, all sorts of things that make the air very dangerous to be breathing. In addition, they also have a lot of toxic emissions, one key example being mercury. Now, mercury both hurts the development of fish when it gets into the water, but then also moves up the food chain to humans, where it can cause brain damage, mental retardation, and even blindness. So we see that right now these chemicals and emissions are hurting the humans as a whole. Because of air pollution, 20,000 people die every single year in the United States. Worldwide, that number is 7 million. So, 200,000 in the United States, 7 million worldwide. So we see overall that if we do not turn this around, then we'll be creating more and more of these problems in the future. Banning new coal-fired plants and phasing out the existing ones leads to less and less of this pollution, less of these emissions that are killing so many people every single year. And lives are what matter the most. So judges, you must vote on the fact that banning all these coal-fired power plants will help reduce climate change, help affirm our agreements on a global scale, as well as save lives. Thank you.
How many ops do you guys have?
2.
Do stats and counter?
They're both pretty short.
Okay.
Should each only take no more than one piece of paper. Let's see. I guess the order is going to be the 2 off and then case in order. Ready? Cool. First off is solvency. 51% of our power in the United States comes from coal generation. We're going to have to replace that with something. Here's what we're going to replace it with. Mostly it's going to be natural gas. There's going to be very little like deployment of renewable energy because first of all, there's no political will to deploy renewable energy. Like both major parties clash over whether or not renewable energy works or is a good idea. Generally, the Democrats are in favor. The Republicans think it's a very bad idea. However, the problem, the app doesn't get to figure out what exactly happens, and so we're talking about what's going to happen here in the real world. There is no political will to invest in renewable energy. Go ahead.
Actually, 60% of humans in the United States, 60% support renewable energy and the expansion of that, according to recent Gallup polls.
Sure, that's great, but they're not the ones making the decision. The people in power are the ones making the decision. What we see here is that there's no political support for renewable energy because it's always going to be more expensive. I'm sure they support it if you ask them in a poll, but when you ask them to put their money where their mouth is, and we'll read you some evidence later about how all of the renewable options are more expensive than like traditional options, when you're asking them to put their money where their mouth is, they're always going to go for the cheapest thing every single time, at least in aggregate. So basically what happens here is that this is impossible to phase out quickly enough. There are a lot of coal-fired power plants. This represents a huge amount of infrastructure because not only do we have to deal with the coal-fired power plants, we have to deal with the coal mines and the coal trains and all of the infrastructure and not to mention the high-tension wires that actually deliver this power to the homes and businesses of people who use it. It is impossible to phase this out quickly enough and then also build more power plants because we'd have to build not only the power plants but also all of the associated infrastructure. And so what happens here is that this is just not going to happen. We're not going to be able to replace coal-fired power plants at the rate that is necessary in order to maintain a sustainable amount of electricity for the U.S. electricity grid. Go.
I'm sorry, are you aware that these are all privately owned, that power plants and coal-run power plants are owned by private companies, and that they'd be the ones phasing this out? So the government has nothing to do with this. It doesn't matter to the government.
Okay, but the ones who are, first of all, two responses. First, like they're all regulated by state-owned companies, and so like we tried deregulation in 2001 California, it didn't work. So now all of the utilities are regulated by state-owned or federal-owned, state-owned or federal-owned companies. And then the other response to this is, I mean, it would have to come from somewhere. The problem is not phasing it out. The problem is introducing new technologies, because that all requires more infrastructure, more high-tension wires. That requires more transportation to get like the raw materials to the power plants. All of these things are things that just cannot happen at a replacement rate that is fast enough for the affirmative. So the impact here is a massive increase in cost of electricity, because like we're basically going to have also electricity shortages. So rolling blackouts, rolling brownouts, just because there's not going to be enough electricity, because we're not going to be able to replace everything that we have, thus the counterplan. USFG will mandate that all new coal-fired power plants have CCS, I'll explain what that means later, technology, and convert all existing coal-fired power plants to CCS by 2025. USFG will mandate that all new coal-fired power plants have CCS technology and convert all existing coal-fired power plants to CCS by 2025. Any questions?
If you're going to explain CCS.
I will. CCS is carbon capture and sequestration. So basically what it does, it's also known as clean coal. So what it does is it takes the carbon dioxide waste that the opponents told you comes so prevalently out of power plants, and what it does is it basically just captures it. They put it in they turn it to liquid form, and then they bury it underground. They forget about it. So what happens here is now you have a coal power plant that does not release harmful carbon dioxide into the air. So here's the solvency. First, solves their environmental impacts because we're not releasing any of this carbon dioxide into the air. Second, solves the problem of like access to energy. These power plants are still going to be here. We only have to retrofit them, and so it solves the problem of like access to energy, which means that there's not going to be as much cost. There's not going to be power shortages. There's not going to be blackouts. And there's not going to be all of the outrage that happened basically when we tried to deregulate the energy industry in 2001. All of those things are going to be avoided. Second, we're also going to be solving infrastructure, because you're using the same power plants, which means you can use the same coal trains and the same train lines and the same high-tension wires and the same organizational hierarchy, organizational structure among the local power utilities. So basically what this does is it does everything that the affirmative does in terms of environmental and health impacts, but it does it better, it does it cheaper. So yeah, it's cheaper than their plan, because they build new stuff in that world. They're building new stuff. However, we're going to be retrofitting it. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any guarantees that this will happen by 2025?
Yeah, I do.
Guarantees that companies will actually do this, and any guarantees that CCS will always work every single time?
Okay, well, here's the thing. It's just a regulation. So when you introduce a regulation, you say you have to do it by 2025, or we're going to shut down your company. So yes, companies, not to mention that these are state-owned utilities, so they have to follow the rules. And yes, they are going to do it. We do have a guarantee, just like you have a guarantee, not to mention we have fiat power. Let's go on case. First off, they're talking about climate change. They say coal is the dirtiest because it releases CO2. Here's the problem. So we talked about earlier about how renewables wouldn't be the ones to replace it. What would most likely be the technology of choice that's going to replace this is natural gas. We see that natural gas is already gaining enormous popularity. It produces about half of California's energy, and so natural gas is also something that like both parties can agree on. So the problems with natural gas. An increase in natural gas consumption will necessarily lead to an increase in natural gas drilling and in natural gas extraction. This releases harmful methane into the atmosphere, which is estimated by the Department of Energy to have up to 10 times the environmental impact of carbon dioxide. So when we have more methane as a result of more natural gas, when we have more methane as a result of more natural gas, that's going to be like another environmental impact that flows against the affirmative. It's going to be something that flows against the affirmative, because the affirmative plan requires that we have more of something. Second, even if they win that like there's going to be renewables, wind power is inefficient. Nuclear power, there's no political will whatsoever. We haven't built any nuclear plants for the last 30 years. Solar power, you need sun, you need land. There is massive environmental impact because it destroys habitat areas. We can see that with the power plants that are currently the towers of power, solar towers that are currently going on in the Anza Borrego Desert. Near my homeland, there's like massive habitat degradation because it takes a lot of land, and it's also like an unreliable source of energy. So that's why we usually have coal plants, because you can always get electricity. You just got to keep feeding coal into it. You don't get the same thing about solar unless you're in a very special climate zone. Next is wind. Wind has the same environmental impacts. It kills birds. It disrupts migratory patterns. It creates like vortices, again, that kill lots of birds. Also, you need to be in a windy area, and like wind changes, wind shifts. So Even if you use all those technologies, they don't work. Their second contention that they're upholding agreements, the agreement is to reduce the impact of carbon emissions. It's to reduce carbon emissions, which we do in the counterplan. And then the third is that bad for health. Methane is actually worse than CO2 in terms of environmental degradation. These reasons we negate.
Was this video going out okay, or should I slow down a little bit?
No, it's fine.
Perfect.
It's fine.
Awesome. All right. Ready, set, go. All right, the first clarification I have to make is about political will versus corporations. Now, the issue here is corporations do what's profitable. They're profit-driven, they're money-driven, they want to keep stockholders happy. They do what's most profitable. Right now, what is most profitable is renewable energy. The Economist, November 2014, says right now, renewables are more cheap. Renewables are cheaper than any sort of coal or non-renewable source. Right now, renewables are cheaper than oil, natural gas, coal, etc. Why? Because in the future, they're going to be more beneficial, but right now, literally, the price of the market per unit says that they are cheaper for electricity. That's just a fact. Yeah?
Okay, so why is the cost of implementation of renewables so low?
I'm sorry, what?
Why is the cost so low? Okay, let me phrase my question differently. Was the cost low, was the cost still so low before 2009 and the stimulus package that provided massive environmental subsidies?
I'm really unclear as to why you're asking me this.
All right.
I think what they're trying to get at is that the fact that the environmental bill and the stimulus package of 2008 stimulated more green jobs. That's true. It created 3 million green jobs. Those 3 million green jobs took off, expanded more corporations. Corporations rapidly expanded, and renewables got cheaper after 2009. That's a continuation of the status quo. It wasn't just an effect of the stimulus package that was temporary, it's permanent. So now there's more corporations, more companies that are utilizing solar renewables. For example, in 2012, 40% more companies began using solar for one of their primary methods of electricity. 40% of companies switched to solar in 2012, rapidly expanded it as part of their infrastructure and as part of the way they're running their company. That's a huge amount of energy, that's a huge amount of risk, and that's a huge amount of benefits. And honestly, right now, the political will does not matter. Companies are moving towards renewables. That's, I think, the main clarification in this round that I want to make. All right, moving off case first to the counter plan. So, the first thing we talked about, or for our disadvantage, is solvency. They said people were going to be replaced with natural gas. They have no clarification, there's no justification, there's no evidence. They literally just said people like natural gas. And they then threw us evidence of California. First of all, renewables are the largest growing sector of any sort of energy within the United States or outside the United States. Renewables are the largest growing sector. They're growing like 300% per year. It's ridiculous how fast they're growing. For example, Tesla, $3.3 billion. It's a very new company. Usually companies take a while to get up to a couple $1 million. Tesla's been around a couple years. It's $3.2 billion, manufactured thousands and hundreds of thousands of models. It's extraordinarily beneficial. It's putting out electric cars everywhere in the United States. There's a lot of renewables, a lot of energy that's going out across the United States. Now, in other words, they can't guarantee it's going to be replaced with natural gas because right now it's growing at 300%. It is the fastest growing source of energy in the United States. Stop all. There's no stopping that. It's just the facts. All right. Now, the next thing we talked about is how there's no political will. Again, political will doesn't matter. Businesses do what's profitable. Right now, renewables are profitable. They're cheaper than coal. They're cheaper than natural gas. They're cheaper than oil. Right now, renewables are profitable. Businesses who are in charge of these power plants will be replaced by other places and be replaced by other areas. They talked about coal mines, trains, wires, how to build power plants. Again, the trains, the wires, those can be utilized to transport other forms of electricity. The only thing that's actually a possible problem is the coal mines. There's very few issues shutting down coal mines. I don't really see a problem with this. Honestly, they gave you no terminal impacts on this. They just said, oh, because doing the coal mines are kind of hard. They don't give you any reason why. They just say you can't phase that quickly enough. They have no evidence for this. It's really relative. There's no bright line on whether or not it's quick enough or not quick enough. There's no clarification on this. They just say, oh, somehow we're going to manage to replace everything with CCS. Somehow you're not going to manage to shut down all these coal power plants with no justification, no evidence, no explanation whatsoever. Without evidence, you can't vote for it. Now, the next thing we talked about is how there's going to be deregulation. It didn't work in 2001 in California. They never clearly explained this. I don't think it makes any sense. We're not advocating complete deregulation. We're saying, look, if you ban power plants, if you give people the capability in the market to reach out to consumers and for renewable companies to take over that market and to expand their reach to consumers and get more consumers to have that, that's more beneficial. Why? Because if coal is cheap, yeah, people are going to buy coal. If coal's not available, people buy renewables. That's how it works. Even their clean coal is extraordinarily dirty. Their clean coal has a lot of problems with groundwater contamination, fish contamination. The mercury we talked about, 47 toxins that come from coal power plants do not have any impact on carbon. CCS doesn't affect 47 toxins plus mercury, which our partner talked about, destroys fish and destroys local ecosystems. They keep destroying local ecosystems, destroying fish, destroying any capability to get food from those fish. In other words, they keep up birth defects and deaths in the United States, thousands per year from the contaminated mercury, contaminated fish. Now, the next thing I talked about is how there's going to be new technology. Again, businesses are already doing solar and renewables. All we have to do is give them the market space. They are literally really in ramp to go. All that's happening is right now some people are buying coal instead. If we take out the coal, people are going to buy renewables. It's a pretty simple link story. Now, next thing I talked about is how we're going to mandate CCX technology and convert. The first thing I talked about is how there's political will to do it. Political will does not matter. I already explained it's businesses are doing it. They talked disadvantages on the counterplan. First, it's extraordinarily expensive. CCS, retrofitting these is way more expensive than shutting them down. Shutting them down just means you have to say stop sending people to them. If you have to like mandate this and retrofit the entire thing, it costs billions of dollars for every single coal plant. We have thousands of coal plants across the United States. It'll take millions of dollars to work through all these, and companies are not willing to spend that sort of money. States aren't willing to spend that sort of money. It won't happen ever. It's extraordinarily expensive. Second one, underground water. I already said about this. Groundwater is contaminated. They said they buried underground and forget about it. Yeah, they haven't forget about it. The fish don't forget about it. The people don't forget about it. The people who are drinking that contaminated groundwater and dying from mercury poisoning don't forget about it. That has horrible impacts on the environment and horrible impacts overall. So it doesn't work, it's ineffective, and it's horrible for the environment. Now, next thing I talked about is going to be more energy. Infrastructure uses power renewables. Again, this doesn't make any sense. I honestly have refuted all of this already. All right, let's move on, case. So, our first advantage talked about how we're going to be climate change, etc. They said natural gas replaces it, half of California's energy. Then they wanted a whole list about renewables and why they don't work. First of all, they listed vast majority of renewables. Solar highways were not touched. Hydropower was not touched, both growing sectors. Second of all, wind ineffective. That's ridiculous. Wind's extraordinarily effective. It's growing rapidly. Nuclear, we're not advocating for nuclear. Solar, again, solar is extraordinarily effective. They use solar roadways, solar panels, other things like this. They have no clarification on this. Wind might kill some birds. Yeah, they just move the wind planes. There's no issue here. They try to refute all of these by saying that, oh, renewables aren't going to work. There's more renewables. People are creative. Businesses are creative. They'll do what's profitable. And what's profitable right now is renewables, not because 60% of people want it and will buy it, but because renewables are better for the environment. It's better business. Now, second thing they talked about is how China and India. They said the distance counter plan. This is really important because they basically dropped this point. They don't destroy coal-fired power plants. They don't phase out coal. They say we're going to keep using coal. We're going to keep using this. China uses 4/5 of all its energy as coal and kills millions of people in China every single year based on air pollution. I'm sorry, it's protected time. I'm not going to take it. In other words, they allow China and India to keep doing this because if we don't set a precedent, if we don't say China and India, we're going to follow through on our deal, it looks like we're weak, it looks like we're not following through, and then if we don't follow through, they won't either. People die in China and India of air pollution. No one tries to look for renewables. There's no incentive whatsoever. They basically dropped this. So all the impacts I've heard talk about flow right through. Third point, again, 200,000 deaths in the United States, 7 million globally. They said methane. They have no deaths from methane. We're talking about carbon dioxide alone, just carbon dioxide. Methane has no solvency, no contradiction. There's no class for their second and third points, so they're basically dropped. And honestly, there's more toxins released that they didn't talk about. 47 toxins plus methane. With all this, I strongly urge an aft vote. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Why don't we go off case and then on case? Okay. And since a lot of the arguments sort of like got jumped side by side by the app, I'm going to try my best to point out where we are. All right, so let's begin. In refutation to our counterplan, our opponents basically talked about how CCS would be extremely expensive. Now, first, this is by government contracts. Governments are going to contract these companies to do this. It isn't going to be at the expense of these businesses because these businesses are contracted by the government. So basically, this is, in addition, second refutation in a moment, please. This is a lot less expensive than a complete overhaul. We are, under the affirmations plan, we'll be completely demolishing these plants. We'll be closing down these coal mines. And they want us to basically ship this entire job market out to who knows where, basically literally ditch these employees in a course of 10 years. So it'll cause enormous job loss, and not only, basically these factories, these coal mines, these coal transportation, these railways, all these coal cars are going to sit empty. And our opponents want us to believe that this CCS system, simply attaching a module onto like the smokestack of a coal plant, is going to be more expensive than a complete overhaul and trying to find some renewable energy source that is going to be cheaper and able to be mass produced to the entire American population. Yes.
First of all, I don't understand your contract argument. Second, that seems like a moving target. If you're putting out new government contracts that were never in the first counter plan, I don't understand how it's not a violation of also the parliamentary rules.
Okay, it's not a moving target because that's how it works. When you're like building public utilities, the way that it works is the government says, yo, I want a coal power plant, or yo, I want like more solar energy, and then companies bid for those contracts. So first, you don't just, it's not like private companies just like build a dam, you know? So it's like government contracts them out to do it, and then government pays them for it.
Okay, same thing with defense contractors. Anyways, okay, and also our opponents brought up about how CO2 is buried underground, how that will poison people. First of all, I think our opponents were talking about mercury that poisons people. CO2 release causes greenhouse emissions, but the problem is we are burying that underground and we're keeping it in closed containers, much like radioactive waste, which is a renewable energy source, by the way. Okay, anyways, moving on. So our main advantage is solvency. Number one, we save the environment. Number two, cheap energy. Saving the environment is because we no longer allow CO2 to escape into the atmosphere, and we also provide cheap energy because contrary to what our opponents say about cheap renewable energy, there's Tesla, there's hybrids. Well, first of all, Tesla Motors is actually really expensive if we haven't noticed. And also the problem with renewable energy is that we can't just like, if renewable energy has been so cheap, that's mainly because of the government subsidies that reduce the price, much like how fast food is extremely cheap. Because government subsidize the wheat, subsidize the meat that is going into fast food. That is the reason why renewable energy is so cheap. Once these subsidies go out, renewable energy prices are going to soar way up. Because if they are in fact intrinsically so cheap, then why has the country not been covered with windmills, solar power, and power plants? Obviously there's some reason to that. And these contractors aren't just going to build it if there is no point to it. If it is so cheap, if it's so wonderful, and it doesn't pollute the world, then why hasn't the United States completely switched over to that? Yes?
Well, like you said, we're building the infrastructure right now. It takes time. Second of all, how many subsidies do we have right now on renewable energy in the United States? What are the numbers? Give me like statistics. Give me something.
Well, I do not have an exact number, but all I can...
Hundreds of billions, yeah.
Yeah, but basically, if it has caused the cost of wind production, for example, to fall, windmill renewable energy source research to fall by 90%, it has to be a very significant number. It's definitely in the hundreds of billions. Okay, anyways, so now we figured out this public versus private convolution. So, yeah, so why has America not been completely taken over by renewable energy? Our opponents talk about how this is being developed. Well, first of all, this can't be really applied to the mass population. Okay, so going over to the on case, our opponents talk about hybrid cars. Why aren't we talking about hybrid cars, Teslas, all this other stuff? Okay, well, first of all, in addition to the fact that Teslas literally cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, they are at the $100,000 mark, so it's not like it's for everyone. Second, this isn't even relevant because we're talking about energy, like the stuff that lights these lights and it powers like the computers. We're not talking about stuff that runs cars. 50% of coal is used for like energy, lighting the house. Exactly, providing energy through these wires to the people's houses, not to power your cars. Like, I see how hybrids are powered by electricity, but that's not relevant to our case right now. We're talking about coal-fired power plants, and those are for energy production, not transportation. That's mainly taken over by oil. Okay, so our opponents have all these impacts about ice caps, lower food output, biodiversity, and acid rain, and the thing is we solve for this. Because all these issues about like CO2 emissions, our CCS system is going to solve for that. Now, contrary to what our opponents say about how this is going to cause enormous amounts of money, let's take a look at what would happen if these subsidies, first of all, end, and second, we see that we need to supply the 300 million Americans who currently have an ever-increasing energy budget in renewable energy sources. What would we have to do? First of all, the plan doesn't really provide for any of this. They basically said, yeah, let this R&D for renewable energy sources take its time. The problem is these 300 million people aren't going to be able to get the same cheap, affordable energy that we can currently offer through coal power plants. What we're going to happen, like my partner stated, energy shortages, energy brownouts. There are going to be energy shortages, and what this is going to end up happening is energy prices are going to go up, and for those living on the marginal levels of income, these people are going to have a hard time basically powering their own houses. And all this is because we want the green environment. Yes, we do want a green environment. We don't want people coughing to death because of pneumonia caused by all this like SO2 or other emissions, but the problem is we also need to take a look at the whole net benefits of the scheme of the United States, and we see that right now we do not have the capability. Renewable energy has not fallen to a cost that would allow the entire United States to adopt all of that and completely get rid of coal-fired power plants within the 10-year time frame that the plan enforces, and without causing like electricity prices to skyrocket, because obviously since we haven't seen renewable energy take on such a great impact, and basically like if the impacts are so great that our opponents say it is, then why has renewable energy not completely taken over by now? Yes?
Look, you're saying it takes time to get rid of infrastructure, then you're not allowing time for renewables to build that same infrastructure. I don't see disregard 200,000 deaths from air pollution. I don't understand these arguments.
Okay, well, let's take a look. First of all, 200,000 deaths from air pollution. We're basically, our opponents are basically having like a root cause specific reason. So usually 200,000 people die from pneumonia. Pneumonia is caused from multiple causes. It's not just one cause, not just CO2. It's a multiple of causes. So it might be because they live in a poor district, or maybe it's because of other air pollutants or water pollutants. But the problem is, by simply labeling this as the problem of the coal plants, there's a gross misconception. It could also be a variety of other issues, either lifestyle or environmental. But anyways, okay, so going over upholding agreements with China. These agreements that when Obama went to China, were explicitly to reduce the impact of CO2, which is exactly what the counterplan solves for. Our opponents want to construe this into some sort of like, we want to totally phase out coal. Well, obviously this is impossible for both China and India, and even reducing the amount of emissions is basically impossible for China, as analysts have already shown. So basically all we can hope for is to reduce the impact, and that is exactly what the counterplan does. And finally, how coal harms humans. Our opponents constantly mix up methane, mercury, and then CO2. Yes, we are reducing the amount of CO2, that we are basically trapping the CO2 and these other harmful chemicals, and we are storing them in enclosed caskets underground. They are not going to escape. Unlike natural gas pipelines, unlike other renewable sources, there aren't going to be like these other costs, benefit, and as well as jobs and electricity price increases that would happen if you follow the plan.
Off case and then voters. Everyone ready? They don't seem to understand the fact that when you shut down power plants, that's not the issue. The issue is starting up new ones, because it doesn't only require you to like build the renewable energy. It requires you to build the high tension wires. It requires you to build like all of the infrastructure that is required to go along with renewable energy. That's where all of their economic problems are coming from. So even if you buy that renewable energy is cheap in the status quo, you still have to realize the fact that the opponents have to build new infrastructure. You got to build the high tension wire that gets you out to the desert so that you can build your solar panels. You have to build a train line that will get you to your liquid natural gas plant so that you can transport your raw materials. You have to do all of these things in the affirmative world, and in the negative world we don't, because we use the same power plants on the same sites, the same infrastructure. So all of those costs are avoided in the world of the counterplan. Onto their disadvantages. First, they said CCS is expensive. The thing that they're not, first of all, it's not that expensive. It's expensive to build a whole new power plant. That's what the affirmative is advocating. It's not that expensive to just retrofit the system onto a power plant that already exists. So CCS may be like expensive by one metric, but by the metric that we're weighing it against, which is it more expensive than building essentially an entirely new power grid, then no, CCS is by far the more economically smart choice. Their next point is about groundwater contamination. Here's the thing. Concrete, the fact that concrete exists and the fact that we have a lot of it and that that's how we store things underground outweighs their logic. Sure. Yeah, my partner brought it up in like the last 10 seconds of his speech. He said, we encase it underground and that solves your impacts.
Either way, I think it's a new argument. Judges, this panel, you take into consideration.
I will start my time again. Either way, just to extend what my partner said, there's not going to be a problem with groundwater contamination in the world of the counterplan. Let's go on to voters. First is solvency. There's going to be a gap in the implementation, because as I said, it is going to take a long time and a lot of effort to build what essentially amounts to an entirely new power grid, to entirely new electrical generations and transmission systems that is required in the world of the affirmative. 10 years is not enough time. There will be a gap. What happens here is that the cost of electricity is first of all going to skyrocket massively. Second, we're just not going to be able to provide enough power, so there's going to be blackouts in all of the United States. These are things that hurt every single person in the United States, because there just will be a gap. There's no way for us to avoid that. Second, we provide electricity cheaper. Again, we use the same infrastructure. We don't have to pay back the building of all of that infrastructure. So not only are the other forms of electricity that the affirmative is endorsing more expensive if you ignore the subsidies that were given in the 2009 stimulus package, not only are they more expensive, you also have to realize the fact that power companies, utility companies, will have to be paying back all of the loans that they have to take out. They will be paying back the companies to build all the new infrastructure that comes in the world.
All of this is new argumentation brought in the last speech. Subsidies, loans, the fact that subsidies are part of the stimulus package now, all new argumentation. It's a panelist will be in consideration.
Okay. Here's the thing. My partner brought up subsidies. Even if you don't buy the loans part, my partner did bring up subsidies and how it's extremely, and how most of the reason why renewable energy is cheap is because of subsidies. So you can weigh that anyway. So anyway, we provide cheaper energy just because coal, first, is a cheaper energy source, and second, because we don't have to build all this new infrastructure. And by the way, I want to quickly discuss this public-private issue. The way that public utilities get things built is they say, we want something to be built here. Like, for example, the Hoover Dam wasn't just built because some private company decided that they wanted to build it. It was built because there was a government contract who said, we need a dam here that will produce electricity, and then private companies rushed in to fill that contract. That is the way that public utilities get things built. So yes, political will, which the opponents essentially ignored, is extremely important. There is no political will for renewable energies, and political will decides which power plants get built. It decides which power plants get built. Let's go to the impact analysis. We have fewer emissions in the world of the counterplan. Basically what happens is that there's just going to be fewer emissions. Most of the carbon dioxide emissions are non-unique. They happen in both worlds. However, you can look to the other emissions, things like methane, that are going to be increasing massively and rapidly in the world of the affirmative, but not in the world of the negative. So what you are going to want to weigh this against is, even if there are some problems with groundwater contamination, even if you buy that there are problems with other kinds of environmental contamination. The problem here is that that's still going to be outweighed by the fact that we are actually providing things cheaper for citizens, and we're looking at this for net benefits. We're looking at whether it's a point source, like environmental contamination is a point source, right? So if some people might have to be moved out of their houses, but in return, we are providing cheaper electricity for every single person, and we are, especially compared to the world of the affirmative. And so, energy is a necessity. We can't just get rid of it, and the only team that gives you that possibility is the negation. Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Is that one ready? I'm just going to go briefly over three voters. Time begins now. I strongly affirm today's resolution. Now to get straight into my voter issues, the reasons why you should vote for the affirmative team in today's round. My first is just talking about these renewable energies. What is actually going on in the status quo, and what will go on with each of the different plans? Now, as my partner brought up, and they seem to have ignored, the cost of renewables has dropped very significantly in the last 30 years. Now, they say that all of this is because of the subsidies from 2009. But the fact of the matter is that is not the case. As she brought up herself, the cost is down so much because of more investment, because the companies are going all out. This market is growing 300%. That is not all because of these subsidies, many of which don't even exist anymore. As she already said, and they chose not to respond to, this is the private companies that are driving it forward because they know it's the energy that's going to be more important in the future. So we see right now, renewables are already cheaper, not because of subsidies, but because of the companies. So we see that they're already cheaper. And then they say, well, if they're so great, then why aren't we already having them? As my partner brought up, we don't have them yet because coal is still cheaper, because there's no market space for these renewables yet. Now, judges, they chose to drop this argument about there not being any market space for renewables in the status quo that we would be creating under the affirmative plan. Because they've done this, they guarantee to you that when we ban these coal-fired power plants, we then create the market space we need to be allowed to develop these renewable energy sources, allow them to take over the U.S. energy market. Thus, we see as a whole, we'll be able to have these renewables taking over the energy, able to provide this energy that they say will somehow be lacking. Now, they keep also making all these arguments about how we won't have the infrastructure. As my partner brought up, and they have entirely ignored, we already have this infrastructure. We don't need to build all of these new power plants, all of these new things. We already have the infrastructure to get the energy, and clearly we already have all of the power plants that we're just going to be destroying. You don't have to just destroy the power plant, you just repurpose it for using this renewable energy. So I don't see how any of these arguments about how it's going to take so long or energy blackouts.
Point of order. That point about like repurposing power plants is totally new.
That is actually literally exactly what my partner was talking about, saying we already have the infrastructure, we can just reuse it right now. I'm assuming you'll take it into consideration. I'll just continue. So we see that in the status quo right now, renewables, all they need is this market for them. All they need is coal to get out of the way. And then we see that once the renewables will fill up the gap from coal in the affirmative world, renewables will help the United States as a whole, reducing CO2 emissions, methane emissions, any types of these emissions that you might dream of. All of these renewable energy sources don't have those problems. So we see that we'll be saving lives as a whole, as well as providing cheap, affordable energy for everyone across the United States. In addition, they keep bringing up how there's no political will. First of all, they have absolutely no evidence for that. Second of all, as my partner said, 60% of the population, this includes politicians, are supporting these renewable energies. So if anything, we have the political will and the will among businesses. Now to move on to my second voter issue, which is looking at what the counterplan is actually going to be doing. Now they say that we're not going to have any problems with CO2 emissions, that they're going to manage to trap every last bit of it. Now they compared trapping the CO2 underground to trapping radioactive waste underground. So I'll compare it to that. I'm sure you've heard of it. Radioactive waste doesn't just stay where it is. As my partner brought up, containers leak. That's simply the fact of the matter. You cannot guarantee that there will be absolutely no leaks. And beyond just that, all of the impacts of this environmental degradation do not all stem from carbon dioxide. Many of them stem from other bad things about coal, not just carbon dioxide, as my partner kept bringing up and they refused to respond to. The 47 other toxins, as well as mercury. All of these are creating many problems for humans, birth defects, blindness, all of these illnesses that have nothing to do with carbon emissions and will not be solved whatsoever in the negation world. In addition, all the 200,000 deaths in the United States from air pollution, 7 million worldwide. Air pollution isn't just carbon dioxide. That simply does not make sense. All of these deaths are from air pollution as a whole. Even if they're limiting this carbon dioxide by trapping it underground, there's still air pollution. There's still all of these toxins. So in the negation world, we see that we're supposedly solving the problems, while still leading to thousands of deaths every single year, still leading to more and more climate change over the long term. So overall, not really solving these impacts and more hurting them overall. So we see that if we're just going to have all of these standards, that's not solving these problems. That's not solving the problems of saying we're still going to stick with coal. That's not helping the environment. That's not helping our people. So when we look overall at net benefits, looking at both short-term and long-term impacts, we see that by banning these coal-fired power plants, we'll be able to get rid of this environmental harm now. Get rid of all the things that are leading not only to CO2, but to other things such as mercury, other air pollution deaths. All of this will stop under the affirmative plan. And we see that we'll also be affirming a precedent on the worldwide scale. Not staying with coal and going back on our agreement, but rather setting a precedent for more renewables as a whole. With all this, I strongly affirm.